Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the 5 Elements of Success Player Development Series. My name is Tyler Campbell. I'm the Director of Performance here at the Golf Performance Center. I'm here with Dennis Hillman, our Director of Coaching, as well as Dr. Josh Brant, our Clinical Psychologist here. As you can see, Roger Nick is not here with us today. I have some big shoes to fill, but I'm going to do the best that I can. We're excited to have some great conversation about the mental game here on today's episode. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to stay COVID-19 safe. If you're out there playing tournament golf, please make sure that you're respecting the guidelines of wearing your mask, staying socially distant, and doing everything we can to stay safe and healthy. All right. We want to make this show as interactive as possible, so please send all your questions and comments to 5elements@thegolfperformancecenter.com. They're also available in our YouTube chat. This week, guys, we're not going to have a pop quiz question as we have in previous episodes. We're excited to thank all of our live viewers today for tuning in with a free mental golf workshop profile. The link is going to be available in the YouTube chat right around 12:30, so continue to tune in and grab that link from the YouTube chat box. All right. Dennis, what did we have last week?
Yeah, so a quick recap of last week. So Tyler, first off, he took us through the dynamic warm-up, which is really critical. When you get to the golf course, should be the first thing you do before you putt, chip, or hit golf balls. Go through that dynamic warm-up, get your body ready to move. So he actually physically demonstrated that. Next, we had Nick Novak on, Director of Custom Clubs. He talked about equipment and quarterly checkups and how important that is, and actually touched on grips and how important it is to have those as often as maybe 2 to 4 times a year, change grips. We also touched on pre, mid, and post-round processes, and we'll dive a lot deeper into that today with Dr. Brant. We talked about the preparation process, pre-round, talked about self-regulation, and then post-round we talked about keeping stats and how that leads to the reflection process. So looking forward to talking to Dr. Brant about that today.
Excellent, Dennis. Thanks so much. So guys, this week we're going to cover really 3 main topics. We're going to talk about how to manage your mental game throughout the tournament season. We're going to show you a great segment that Dennis, Roger, and one of our junior athletes, Chase Perlman, filmed a few days ago regarding some trouble shots and how to approach those trouble shots. And then we're going to come back, and Dr. Brant and myself are going to discuss the mental demands and the physical demands associated with those trouble shots. So, so Dr. Brant, excited to have you back on the show. I know last time you were here, we talked a lot about preparation and confidence and how the two of those areas, work hand in hand with, success on the golf course and in life in general. What mental aspects should we be considering for tournament play this time of year?
Yeah, thanks again. Thanks for having me, Tyler and Dennis. Appreciate it. I think probably the most important thing, we're always going to come back to this when we're talking about psychological skills in golf or at any athletic endeavor is confidence. And the foundation of confidence is preparation. One of the great things about golf is it really affords us the opportunity to prepare ahead of time. And probably one of the most effective things that a golfer can do during tournament season is to do a really good job mapping out, taking notes, preparing during practice rounds, right? Really take advantage of that opportunity to not only understand yourself from a technical and a physical perspective, but also it's this great opportunity to in many ways, mentally rehearse playing a tournament before you even get to play it, right? So I know a lot of juniors don't always take advantage of this, but to go to a course ahead of time, not just get a chance to play, but also to really look at green complexes. Notice, what specific quadrants of a green that might be more favorable to approach shots. Really mapping out what might happen the next day. I think that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So as we've talked about in the past, we travel to 18 tournaments a year with our juniors, and we see our juniors and some other juniors actually playing for score in that practice round the day before the competition, and seems to take their attention away from getting those good notes. They may take a few, but they seem really concerned with score. So what would you say to those juniors out there?
Yeah, so outcome in general, I would say during a practice round is probably something that we don't want to focus on. We're not there to really get a score. We're really there to learn the golf course, right? We're really trying to get a sense of what we might encounter the next day during the tournament. So really outcome score is irrelevant. If you go to any practice round in a professional tournament, you'll never see people really keeping score. You see pros dropping 3, 4, or 5 balls is really working on specific aspects of a shot that they might need to hit, or how a particular slope plays off of a fairway. So I would say, as tempting as it is, right, we often measure ourselves based on outcome, but in terms of preparing for a tournament, I think outcome is irrelevant. In fact, as a quick aside, if you interview golfers and athletes in general about when they're playing their best golf, right, or they're performing at their best, outcome is often something that they're not even aware of. So outcome in general is something we might want to reconsider.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of our junior golfers, we hear conversations where, when they're just starting off in competitive golf, and honestly, even some of the players who have been in the competitive scene for a while, they'll go into the practice round and we'll still hear, hey, I shot 76 in my practice round yesterday, or I shot 73 in my practice round. And that really doesn't matter. The tournament doesn't start till the next day. And so, it's got to be a little strange for a junior golfer to, not keep score. I think that's normal as we're playing the game. Hey, I want to keep score. But you're saying that there's really important reasons that we're not doing it, both from a course management standpoint, but also mentally.
Yeah, well, what you just said, too. What a setup, right? Say you do shoot 72.
Right.
You're already setting yourself for the expectation that you're going to do that the next day, when so many different conditions are going to change. Environmental conditions might change, but definitely psychological conditions are going to change. There's going to be pressure and stress, and so to use that practice round as a measure of how you're actually going to perform in the tournament, I think is just a setup for failure, to be honest with you.
And when you say that yardage book, all that information, if you do really make your primary focus gathering as much information as possible, I always tell our juniors, you have one day or one round to really get to know this course, almost make it like your home course, if you will, right? So gather as much information as possible, but that's also something you can use for visualization pre-round, maybe the night before, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. Again, our brain loves information. Our brain loves familiarity, right? Our brain does not like when we don't know what's going to happen, right? So the more that you can, again, mentally rehearse or visualize, visualization gets a bad rap, mainly because visualization doesn't necessarily mean just to visualize. Right? We really want to try to enroll all of our senses when we're trying to mentally rehearse a behavior. So not just visualizing a shot, but experiencing it completely with our body. What does it feel like? Again, if you watch any professional golfer, there's always some type of physical rehearsal prior to them hitting a shot, especially on more meaningful shots or those challenging shots that we're going to talk about here in a minute. But the opportunity to actually rehearse that, our brain loves that. And neurologically speaking, right, when we think about doing something versus actually doing it, the same neural networks fire in our brain. So I think visualization is a great opportunity to literally practice a behavior, and we know practice makes proficient. So why not take advantage of that opportunity, especially the night before a tournament?
I was watching the 3M Championship this past week, and Sir Nick Faldo was commenting about, I honestly forget who he was discussing, but a short game shot, and how he would repeat the yardage and the type of shot that he wanted to hit in that situation. And I'll paraphrase, but the example was, okay, 62 yards, low ball flight, one hop and stop kind of thing, and he would repeat 62 yards, low ball flight, one hop and stop. And so that's a perfect example of visualization. I thought that was very interesting, and kind of a good example of what we're talking about
it's
here.
a beautiful example, and another reason why we need to practice, not just visually but literally too, is because he can actually call up that shot from his mental memory bank, right? Really important to be able to do that. Anders Ericsson, one of the most famous people talking about expert performance, often talks about mental representations, right? Mental representations are these rehearsals, this data bank, these resources that we can call up from, and the more that we can mentally rehearse them, the more proficient we get at them. So visualization, hugely important.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, one of the steps to visualization and obviously putting in the reps is putting yourself in those trouble shots. So a few days ago, Roger, Nick, Dennis Hillman, and one of our juniors, Chase Perlman, took to our GPC National out back to work on some trouble shots. So let's take it away, Val. Let's show that video.
Hi guys, we're out here on the GPC National, and we're going to be talking about some trouble shots you may come across while you're out on the golf course in tournament play. We know it can be rattling, so we want to go, we're going to talk with Dennis and one of his players here, Chase Perlman, on how to actually handle this situation out on the golf course. So I'm going to turn it over to Dennis and let him go ahead and show you guys how to handle these troubled shots on the golf course during tournament play.
Hey guys, so we're here with one of our Junior Academy members, Chase Perlman, who's been with us for a few years. So Chase, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So we're going to look at a couple different scenarios here. So Chase, let's say you're out there, you're playing a good round, right? Through 14 holes, you're playing one of your best rounds, right? 15th hole, you miss the green off to the right, and you end up on this tight lie here. So we're going to discuss, how you go about assessing the shot and, what kind of approach he's going to take. So how would you look at this scenario?
Well, I try and use a club with less loft and not make a huge desert here. It doesn't scare me that much, this line, but...
Okay. So, right, this lie is a little bit tighter. So some of the concepts we want to make sure that a junior understands. So would you probably get less spin or more spin off a tight lie?
Less spin.
Yeah, so, okay, so generally you're going to get more spin right off a tight lie. Why? Because there's less interference, right? There's less grass interfering. So that's one concept you want to understand. What about bounce? You understand the bounce of it, right? So a firmer lie will tend to bounce more. So these are some of the concepts you can apply as you adjust. As we talk about the mental game, sometimes, in this situation, you might feel rattled or flustered, right? You've hit a bad shot, and now you're in a scenario that you don't know how to handle it, right? If you don't have the right concepts. So a lot of the confidence, again, comes back to preparation and understanding what it takes to execute that specific shot. So Chase, why don't you go ahead and hit one for us off of there? Solid. Actually, a great shot there. That's about 3 feet from the hole. He hit that really crisply, so really no issues, as he said. It didn't intimidate him. Really well struck shot. But if that's something, if it's a scenario that might intimidate you, there's probably something to look at there in your preparation. Go ahead and spend some time on that specific shot and get more confidence with it. Well done.
Thank you.
Here we are again in another lie that we might find, or you may find yourself in out there on the golf course. So going through Chase's post-game analysis, we noticed that in the short, thick stuff around the greens where he may short side himself, he's had trouble. So Dennis is going to go through this shot with Chase here out on GPC National. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Hillman.
Okay, Chase, so we find ourselves in even a tougher scenario here, right? You've short-sided yourself, you're in the rough, there's not a lot of green to work with. So first step is to interpret the lie, right? So we know you've got a thick lie here, there's a lot of grass between the club and the ball, and you have a lot of wedge options, right? So let me take a look. What have you chosen here? Okay, 58 with 11 degrees of bounce. So we know that's going to be a big factor in how you could take advantage of using that club for this lie, right? Having the loft, obviously, to stop it quicker, and having the bounce, obviously, to allow it to kind of bounce through the rough as you slide under. So one thing to factor in is that this is a difficult shot, and your miss is long. So you may have to accept being 15 feet long or even 20 feet for par and take double bogey out of play. I think that's important to understand. Also, you really want to hone in on picking a landing spot. On any short game shot, always walk up and go stand to your landing spot and understand how's that ball going to react when it lands here. So, all right, interpret the lie, pick a landing spot, and the miss is long. You're going to go ahead and open up the club a little bit, right, and be fairly aggressive to get through the rough. Great. All right, so a lot of thick rough there, right? So, it takes a lot of practice. That's why it's so important to practice with random lies all the time so that you can consistently go through the process of interpreting the lie, picking the landing spot, and then making the appropriate adjustments for that specific shot. All right, well done.
Okay, here we are in another trouble lie. We're here in the bunker on a downhill lie. Again, looking at the post-round analysis, Chase was struggling a little bit with his trouble shots out of the bunkers. So we want to make sure that we're gaining some ground on these shots. So Dennis is going through how to hit a trouble bunker shot here on a downhill lie. So Dennis, take it away.
All right, Chase, so these shots keep getting tougher and tougher, right? So you find your spot in a tough spot here on a downhill lie. You don't have a lot of green to work with. So a couple keys here, right? Again, back to the miss is long, right? You're short-sided, downhill lie. It's hard to get the ball up in the air enough to stop it. I think you've got the same 58, 11 degrees of bounce. So number one is to go ahead and match the slope, okay? And because you're matching the slope with your hips and shoulders, right, you're going to be leaning towards the target. You're going to adjust the ball position more forward than normal, correct? Okay, so ball position, match the slope. and then understanding just the kind of loft you want to deliver, right? So you may need to get a little bit lower just so you can be shallow enough and deliver the club with enough loft to stop it within a reasonable distance. And really in this case, I would say just to keep the ball on the green, you're going to need to do those things. So go ahead and hit one for us. All right, so that was a well-hit shot, right? So to get that ball to stop a little shorter, maybe a little bit more loft, it's set up on the club, a little bit more open, but you really hit the ball well. I think you matched the slope really well, so good job.
Okay, here we are with our last shot of the day. Now again, it's going to be a tough one, and I think we've got some choices to make here. So Dennis and Chase got to make some decisions on how they want to play this. How are they going to save this shot around the green? Very tough lie. So let me turn it over to Dennis and Chase and let you guys see what's happening.
All right, Chase, so you find yourself in a really tough scenario here in the tall fescue around the green. So first thing you're going to want to do is figure out, how do I save a shot here, right? So is an unplayable lie the best option for me? Or can you advance the ball into a better area than one of those options from an unplayable lie would give you? In this case, I think we agree that you can go ahead and attempt to try to get this into an area, maybe not aggressive or try to get it close to the hole, but put it into an area where you can avoid the big number. So to hit this shot with all this tall grass, you're going to need to get a little bit steeper, right, in your backswing. Use some wrist hinge to get that club working up and down really quickly and avoid too much grass here back behind the ball. So go ahead and give that a shot. Wow, well done. All right, so in that case, 3 feet from the hole, that'll work. You definitely saved a shot there. Well done.
Okay, guys, you just saw some very difficult shots there by Chase, and Dennis leading him through those and helping him with understanding how to handle those shots out here on the golf course. Also, when turn it over to the studio or go back into the studio, Dennis and Dr. Brant and Tyler are going to talk about those mental aspects of those shots as well as the physical attributes that you're going to need to hit those shots well. All right, back to the studio.
All right, guys, so to just summarize that, just going over kind of the basic steps of any short game shot and those trouble shots. So first is to assess the lie. There's a lot of subtle nuances in how the ball sits in the grass, obviously the different types of slopes, how the ball can sit in the sand. So first thing is to assess the lie. Next is to pick a landing spot. So when you pick a landing spot, go up to the green, actually stand there and visualize it from that landing spot, how that ball is going to react when it lands and roll out. And last, then you can go back and you can pick your club and pick your technique. Do you want to open the club, use the bounce? So you always go through those 3 basic steps on any short game shot.
Awesome, Dennis, thanks. And so, obviously in previous episodes, guys, we always come back to function dictates form and what are the physical demands on some of these golf shots that we're hitting that are a little more unconventional. We've got the tight lie that Chase had there. It's very, very important that when we have a lie like that, we need to maintain proper posture. All right, we know it's one of our primary fundamentals, and anytime our posture changes dynamically, whether we stand up or whether we maybe dip a little bit, the bottom of our arc of the club is going to affect how we strike the ball. Whether we're on that hard pan, the bounce of that club might actually kind of ricochet off the ground, if you will, into the club. That's the classic sculled shot.
That's right.
But you might chunk it as well. So maintaining dynamic posture is critical for tight lies. When we're in that thick rough, we need to make sure that we've got good, stable lower body. We have the ability to rotate our upper body separate of the lower body, so segmental stability is how we refer to that, as well as good firm grip pressure to control the club face through that unpredictable lie.
That rough wants to close the club face.
Yep,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So when we get to the bunker, the ball's going to be kind of on a tough downhill lie. We need to be able to generate good speed in the bunker. Try to make good contact with that golf ball. Again, controlling the club face and segmental stability. Very similar characteristics there. And then last but not least, out of the fescue, that's one of the toughest shots, most unpredictable shots that we're going to have. Extremely important to control the club face. We've seen Tiger and many of the tour pros with 1 foot in the bunker, 1 foot on out of the bunker, and kind of contorted in all different motions. That's where body awareness and club face awareness comes in. And how's that ball or how's that club going to interact with the golf ball at impact? And so, a lot of the things that we're doing outside of our golf practice to improve body awareness, proprioception, and things is it all comes back to us when we're faced with a situation like that. So very important to, again, address physical function, and mobility and stability in the right areas to make sure you're giving yourself the best opportunity at executing those shots. And mentally, Dr. Brant, we know there's a whole world of things that we need to be working on to improve our chances of succeeding with those tough shots as well. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the first things I want to comment on is the idea that of troubled shots in general, right? We have to be pretty careful with our language. I'm one of these people, and whether it's I don't know if this is one of these annoying psychological or psychologist things to do, but I don't believe in a good or bad shot, right? All that happens is a piece of rubber goes from point A to point B after being struck with a piece of metal. The story you create about that experience is totally up to you and actually within your control. So, but I know in golf culture we talk about these trouble shots, right? So one of the things we need to be mindful is what is the impact of that, right? What is the psychological impact that seeing a trouble shot or seeing a challenging shot, what is the impact that it has on us? And as we talk about kind of mid-round preparation during tournament season, right, we're always going to encounter adversity. There's going to be shots that are going to be challenging or troublesome, and one of the most important things that we can do is really start to self-regulate. And before we can do that, we really need to understand kind of our level of stress, our level of physiological arousal. And if you look up on the screen right now, you'll see there's kind of a classic example in exercise physiology and sports medicine. It's the Yerkes-Dodson curve, and we have performance on one axis and stress and psychological arousal on the other. And you can see what happens. We definitely need stress. There is good stress, right? So we need some stress to motivate behavior, to actually take action on behavior. And actually, if we don't have good stress, if we don't have enough stress, we're going to be bored and not be able to do anything. But as you progress up the curve, you'll see that yellow area, and that's the zone of optimal function. That's where physiological stress, psychological stress, and arousal actually maximize performance. You often hear athletes talk about being in the zone, right? So when you're in the zone, everything makes sense. This is what I was referring to before too. When we're in the zone, we don't think about outcome. But there's also bad stress, right? So when you start to go down the other side of the curve, you'll see that as stress and physiological arousal increases too much, you drop out of that zone of optimal functioning, right? And your performance really starts to deteriorate. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize, especially on these challenging shots, is before you even step in to hit the shot, it's really important to check in with yourself and see where you're at. Are you amped up? Are you too stressed out? As most people often are, because they frame these situations as challenging and difficult, which makes it harder for them, one, to recall everything that both you guys were talking about before. When we're in these stress states, it is really challenging to recall technique. It's hard for us to work on posture, right? It's one of those things. We really just want to swing, close our eyes, and hope things work out the best.
Well, what we know physically, the hormone cortisol is released during these stressful situations, and so when that happens, there's a mental response too, where you were just saying you're not able to take that data in.
Yeah, for sure. When cortisol levels increase, we actually find it's actually hard. Our cognitive functioning starts to deteriorate. Our memory starts to deteriorate. We have a hard time learning new skill. We have a harder time even being more self-aware. Really, in those moments when that cortisol level increases, and I know that seems kind of strange when you're standing in a bunker trying to hit a challenging shot, that you're experiencing threat and stress. But in fact, that actually is what happens physiologically in our bodies.
Right. Well, we all want to do our best to perform the best that we can. I think, how would I, have a sense of where my zone is, or how do I control that?
Yeah, so again, a skill like anything else, like actually executing a technique that would be able to, get the ball out of a challenging situation, being aware of your zone of optimal function is a skill in itself. Most golf, coaching platforms don't address self-awareness, right? So one of the things that we really need to do in our training is to start to practice being self-aware. Right? What is happening in my body right now? Again, as you're learning this skill, oftentimes you catch it after the fact, right? What we want to strive for, an aspirational goal, would be even before we hit our shot, can we check in? Can we see where are we? Is there too much or too little stress? Are we able to really kind of be present in the moment and enough that we can execute that shot from that zone of optimal functioning, or are we lost and do we need to make a correction?
That's really fascinating, because I think a lot of the mentality out there is that I just need to reduce stress. I need to get all the way down to, kind of this meditative, completely relaxed state. But that's just not the reality of performing athletically, right? And so I think it's really more about awareness of what you're saying than just being relaxed.
Yeah, and something we were talking about before, this is subjective, right?
Yeah.
So my zone of optimal functioning is going to be different than yours, Dennis, than yours, Tyler, right? Everybody's is going to be different. And being able to kind of find that sweet spot for yourself is really important, and that takes practice. That's something coaches can help with. That's also just something you can be more mindful of. I often recommend people add some aspect of kind of a mental check-in before, during their pre-shot routine, before they actually execute a shot, right? Can you step back and say, okay, where am I at mentally?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So let's look at a few golfers on tour. We've got Dustin Johnson.
Yeah.
We've got Jason Duffner. Those guys, their zone might be a little different than, say, Tiger or some of these more emotional players that we see, right?
Yeah, right. And those are people who have probably spent a lot of time thinking about what their kind of optimal place is to play golf. And yeah, you have Duffner, who looks sometimes like he's a zombie out there. And then you have probably one of the mentally toughest players in the history of the game in Tiger, who wears his heart on his sleeve.
Sure.
And I think he needs that level of kind of engagement in order to play at his best. So it's really important for the viewers out there to really pay attention. What is your optimal level? And that can only come with practice. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about this, Dennis, too, like when to do that. But really important that we start practicing that. And one other point about that zone, not only is it subjective, but it also is shot dependent, right? We've talked in a previous episode about how Tiger still gets first tee jitters. Well, certain shots are going to invoke. Maybe you're able to keep steady and calm throughout a round or in your zone, but a particular shot gives you trouble. So you need to be skilled at being able to recognize what those particular shots that give you trouble are and be able to make those adjustments.
Yeah,
back to the practice round too, that feeling, that emotion that you feel during a practice round is going to be significantly different than that on tournament day, right?
Oh, for sure.
So another reason that we need to use our practice round in preparation a certain way as opposed to playing for score and looking for a result.
Absolutely. And you talk about how hard it is to recall information and things like that, and I think if you're lacking the information to begin with and then you can't recall half of it, that's pretty tough. So I think that just helps shift your focus to where it should be.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
Dr.
sure.
Brant, if you could just simply define self-regulation for us, just to kind of, and then we can summarize some of the points that we made today.
Yeah, so again, we talked earlier in an episode, right? The name of the game, how do I get the ball in the hole as few shots as possible, right? That's golf. Now, when we're talking from a psychological perspective, in order to control my performance, how I get that ball in the hole as few shots, but I need to be able to control myself.
Sure.
Right? Can I control my thinking? Can I control my feeling? Can I control my behaviors? Right? In order to do that, you need to develop this self-awareness. So that begins, I think, probably one of the things that is most important is this post-round analysis, right? We talked about pre-round, like some important things. We talked about mid-round, what some things to be mindful of, but also this post-round analysis is really critical.
Yeah, so with our juniors, and we talked about it last week, we showed our stat sheet, so that's one thing we have them do, and to us that really, it's not just a means to an end, to get those numbers, it's really to engage in that reflection process. And can you talk about why that is so important?
Yeah, so right, oftentimes again, and I know I'm biased, the mental game gets neglected, right? We don't give enough attention to kind of what were the psychological factors that were related to our performance, right? And I know it's challenging to be able to after you're done with a round, you might be mentally, physically exhausted to take the time to reflect, but really what you're doing is you're trying to develop a skill and being able to grow your awareness of where you're at psychologically during a round in an effort to make an adjustment so that give yourself a chance of improving with performance, right? Early on in your learning of this, right, you're going to be, it's usually after the fact. What we strive for is, can you recognize, right, where you're at psychologically, and maybe part of that self-regulation is you don't need to make any adjustments. You don't need, you're in your zone and you don't need to do anything. But if the more you can grow your awareness of what your psychological state is during a round, the greater chance you can make an adjustment to improve your performance.
Can you talk about the difference, though, as far as the learning, right? The learning that takes place. So obviously, when you're these heightened stress levels
Yeah.
in the competition,
Yeah.
right? How is learning different there than the learning that takes place afterwards or
Great.
when you're reflecting?
Great. Sorry. Yeah. So really important. During a round, you're probably going to be pretty amped up. You're probably going to be pretty stressed. Maybe some good stress. Maybe some bad stress. During those moments, it's really challenging to learn anything new. Really, you're in essence, you're trying to survive in those moments. Right. So taking the time post-round, when your cortisol levels have dropped, when your stress has dropped, you're actually more open to learning. You're more open to being able to reflect on previous experience and in essence, learn.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's fascinating. Some really good stuff there on how the mental game is going to impact our performance. I think we're ready for some questions. Ready for some questions.
Yes, we do have a couple questions today, one of which is just coming in from Roger.
Great. Hey, Roger, how are you?
He asked, if you hit a great shot, how do you back it up with more great shots without expectations?
Yeah.
Doctor?
You want me to take that one?
Take that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in one shot at a time mentality. I think a great shot is just as dangerous as a bad shot, right? Both set up expectations for future performance that I think can only interfere, right? Sure, it's great to experience the confidence of performing well, but you have to be equally as careful that interpretation of that experience doesn't set you up for failure the next time you do it. We always, oftentimes you see people kind of get on these bogey trains because they get frustrated that they bogey a hole or make a double, and that actually impedes their performance on the next hole. Well, elation, excitement, excellent performance can often do the same thing. So I'm a big believer. Enjoy the moment, celebrate, great opportunity, move on, next shot.
Great. Our next question is, could you touch on some specific examples of activities juniors should focus on during a practice round?
Yeah, sure. I could touch on that. So if we just reverse engineered it, the stories of Ben Hogan walking courses backwards and going out with no clubs. But so if we start at the green complex that Dr. Brant talked about, take it as much information in as you can in your yardage book around the green. If they have hole locations marked, spend time putting to those, chipping to those. Even just standing in the middle of the green and looking around and just thinking about different scenarios that are likely to arise as far as where you might leave the ball or want to leave the ball, and hit chips and pitches from those areas and long putts up to those hole locations. So again, forget about the hole location in the practice round. Then working back to the fairway, finding that area. So find that, basically the way I look at it is, if you were going to put a flag that you were aiming at a hole location in the fairway, where would it be? In other words, it would be the farthest from kind of the nearest hazards or rough. So what gives you the best margin for error off the tee and sets you up for an approach shot? It's not always closer to the hole, even though a lot of juniors do think that. And then obviously from the tee box, that's what you're trying to figure out. I think those are the two main things, is the tee shot, landing area, and the green complexes. And then obviously understanding where the main trouble is that you want to avoid. Slope is really key. Understanding elevation changes is really important if you have that. So
one thing too, I'll just elaborate on is, you see on the tour level, these guys are playing similar courses year in and year out. If you're a junior golfer who is finding yourself playing an event year after year, potentially at the same golf course, save your notes. Make more detailed notes the next year, and see if the notes that you took in your initial practice round correlated to tournament play, or if you had to make some adjustments and what those adjustments might be. So, save those notes.
I know another thing we were talking about earlier, Dennis, was this idea of playing to a yardage, not playing to a club. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So often, going around in a practice round, and juniors will say, well, I'm going to hit 3-wood on that hole. But if you think about it, that's sort of like saying on a long par 3, you know what club you're going to hit the next day, where you're aiming for this green. You don't know which way the wind's going to be blowing. You don't know what the temperature is going to be. And there's a lot of variables that are going to change. So really figure out, again, where would I put the flag in the fairway, and what is that distance? What's the line? And then, you figure out the club the day of based on that yardage and how long it plays.
Yeah, and I would say from a mental perspective, lower expectations. Practice round is an opportunity to gather information. That's it. It's not an opportunity to score. It's really just about information gathering.
Great, perfect. Yeah. Any more questions?
Great, and our final question is, what happens when you try to maintain a positive mindset and bad shot after bad shots keep coming?
Yeah. I actually, again, I'm not a believer in positive. I know it sounds strange coming from a psychologist. I think when you say positive thinking, it actually sets you up for disappointment, because the opposite of positive is negative, right? The opposite of good is bad. So I would be a little suspect of whether that thinking is actually positive. If it was truly positive, you probably wouldn't interpret or judge a shot as bad following that. So again, I would stay away from judgment words, because again, there's no such thing as a good or bad shot.
Awesome. I think, Casey, you're giving me heads up. We got one more question.
Yes, we have one more question that actually just came in from Twitter. The athlete said, I know that I sometimes get in my way. How can I fix this?
Yeah. So we hit on this before. It's a great question, right? Because I think, and I love the question. I think it's a question that more people need to ask. It's a sign of humility, really, because it's acknowledging that you in fact are getting in your way. And this is really where that self-awareness skill needs to develop. Start to pay attention to what you're thinking and what you're feeling during your rounds. I really am a believer in this post-round note-taking, right? So after you play a round, where did you get in the way? What did you notice? Maybe you're able to see some really specific areas that there's a theme or there's a pattern that you can then attack. If you can't grow your awareness of a specific situation, you'll never be able to get out of your own way. So again, appreciate it. I get in my way all the time, but the only way out really is to start growing your awareness of how in fact you are actually getting in your way.
Awesome. Dr. Brant, that's great stuff. Yeah. Guys, again, as you guys are developing as junior golfers, we want to encourage everyone to take our self-assessment, download the Junior Golf Hub app, also seek out coach-guided assessments that are available across the country. So the Junior Golf Hub app, again, is great to connect to college coaches, do your college search process as well. So we would like to thank all of our sponsors today, the Junior Golf Hub, as well as Ethan Allen Prep, achieving your greatness on the golf course, in the classroom, and in life. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, 12 o'clock. We'll look forward to seeing everybody then.